Good morning. I'm Terry Brooks with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and we want to thank you for joining us today as we release the 2020 State Data Book for Kids Count. As many of you know, Kids Count is a national initiative spearheaded by the Anna E. Casey Foundation. Each summer, there is a national report released. And for Kentuckians, what it means is we get a chance to see how kids in Kentucky compare to kids in other states in key areas such as economic well-being, education, and health. And then late fall, KYA releases a state-based book. We take those 17 measures of how kids are faring, and we disaggregate every data point to a county level with the hope that principals and preachers, business leaders and activists, county judges and legislators dig into what the numbers say about their hometown, think about what it means for Kentucky at large, and then take action to make things better for kids in Kentucky. This particular year, producing the Kids Count book has been particularly challenging. As always, the core data for Kids Count, the summative data, is historic, which means it did not reflect the pandemic situation. So I would encourage you to still pay attention to that data. The trend lines that are apparent in sort of that report card for Kentucky's kids is still very much at play. You'll see those data points present a good news, bad news story. There was pre-pandemic real progress for Kentucky's kids in areas of health coverage, graduation rate, rates of juvenile incarceration. And yet, as is always the case, it's a yin and yang story. So, for instance, economic well-being showed real progress. And yet we've got to remember, even amidst that progress, that almost 250,000 kids in Kentucky, almost 250,000 kids in Kentucky were living in poverty in pre-pandemic conditions. We wanted to make sure, however, that the data did reflect current situations as we deal with the triple pandemic of COVID, economic meltdown, and a growing awareness of racial disproportionality and injustice. And we know that the data that we collected during the pandemic showed very important trends that we all need to be aware of. For instance, we know that the disparate impact on children and families of color is exacerbated during this pandemic. As an example, 2/3 of Kentucky's Latinx families report a declined income since the pandemic started. We know that fewer than half of Kentucky's African American families report being employed in the past week. We know that 30% of all of Kentucky's children, and that exceeds 35% for families of color, they lack adequate technology at home. And we know that that's simply going to exacerbate what is already gaps around academic achievement. Now, again, the trends that we saw before have only been exacerbated. We know, for instance, that half of Kentucky's families live in a child care desert with limited or no access to child care. You simply can't talk about reopening the economy and protecting families if we don't have adequate child care for families with young children. So that's the kind of mix of the typical Kids Count data with the emerging data set that we've tried to gather as part of the pandemic. I would encourage you And this is not necessarily a fun activity, but I would really encourage you to dig deeply, especially into your own county's profiles. Lift up those numbers. See which data points are a particular concern to your hometown, and then let's begin to work on it together. I would mention to you that I think there are two new data points that are especially important because of the pandemic. You will see that, again, we've done a county by county analysis of the number of students with IEPs, which really translates to students with special needs. And also, we've taken a look at the number of homeless kids on a county by county basis. And heaven knows, we know that among vulnerable populations, kids with special needs are at particular risk of academic regression. And we know what it means for a young person to be homeless at any time. In the midst of the pandemic, it enters the realm of tragedy. So we're really at a crossroad in the Commonwealth. We're at a crossroad for children of color. We're at a crossroad for children in urban and rural communities. We're at a crossroad for families with limited economic resources. We're at a crossroad for children and families who have experienced trauma. And that's what we want to do today, is to focus not just on the issues we face, but on the solutions we can create. I am a principled pragmatist, and I don't think it gets us anywhere simply wringing our hands. We've got to think about what solutions are available from community level partners, from Frankfurt, and from Washington, and that's what we want to do today. So first of all, before we get into the conversation with some key elected leaders and community partners, this effort would simply not be possible without the support of some key partners. We want to shout out our thanks to Mountain Comprehensive Care, Avisus, and Kosair Charities for their support of the Kids Count book. We also want to especially honor Passport Molina Healthcare for their signature sponsorship of the Kids Count initiative in its broadest sense. And to take just a moment to symbolically recognize those sponsors, we thought it was appropriate to invite Ryan Sadler from Passport Health Plan to bring greetings. Ryan is literally in the process of moving to Kentucky, so he's just about to become an official Kentuckian. And so welcome to your first, and what we hope are many, Kentucky Kids Count releases. Ryan, thanks for your support. And why don't you bring some greetings and perspectives from the Passport world?
Yeah, thank you so much, Terry, and for all of you for having us. I'm Ryan Sadler, the president of Passport Health Plan by Molina Healthcare. And at Passport, we're real proud to again sponsor the 2020 Kids Count data book. Passport has a long tradition of serving the Medicaid population in Kentucky, and we currently have 325,000 members, 43% of whom are children. With decades of local and national experience, Passport is committed to improving the health and lives of all Kentucky children. So our Medicaid-focused approach is built upon our whole person, locally driven based care model, meeting the members where they are, whether it's in an urban or rural setting, in the community, or now due to COVID, virtually. Medicaid coverage is foundational to health, particularly for our children. And we are committed to ensuring that all Kentucky families and children receive the quality health care they need. We share Kentucky Youth Advocates' goal to help Kentucky children live a happier, healthier life. And the annual Kids Count effort is critical in helping these communities understand where we are and where we need to go in order to create a brighter future for our youngest generations. So at Passport, we're proud to support the Kentucky Youth Advocates and this important initiative and excited to work together with our partners across the Commonwealth to build a better tomorrow for our children. So thank you, Terry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and appreciate the opportunity to support you.
Thanks so much, Ryan. So the question is now, what's next? As I already indicated, we believe that we all have to demonstrate a vigorous action for bias every year, but especially this year, in the midst of multiple crises and pandemics. I would suggest to you that there's real reason for hope and optimism. What I will tell you, in an admittedly divisive and polarized environment in Frankfurt, that we have had good and frequent and deep conversations with Senate leadership, House leadership, and the Beshear administration. And if there is a common ground, common sense, and common good agenda, we think it is around improving the lives of children. Whether it's from the Senate President's office, the Speaker of the House, or the Governor's office, we hear common threads of commitment. So I just want to emphasize that while there are honorable differences from lots of different players in Frankfurt, as we think about that opening gavel, don't get lost in the idea that there are unifying themes when it comes to kids and families. We think that is such an important takeaway from today. And we wanted to make sure that you heard, don't want to say from the horse's mouth, but from the horse's mouth. And so what we have is a key member of the Kentucky House, a key member of the Kentucky Senate, and a message from the governor. So after you listen to Governor Beshear's pre-recorded video, we're going to invite Senator Jimmy Hidgon from Lebanon and Representative James Tipton from Lebanon to jump in. And Representative Tipton, Senator Hidgon, and the governor will bring remarks, and then it'll come back to me, and we'll move toward a community-based approach. So with that, we are so appreciative that the governor took time from his schedule to offer his perspective on the 2020 Kids Count report.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time to participate virtually today for this very important unveiling of this year's Kids Count book. What this resource does is show you how far too many of our children in Kentucky are struggling. They were struggling before this pandemic with unacceptable amounts of abuse and neglect, far too much hunger, difficulty based on lack of resources in educational attainment, and far too many families suffering from substance use disorder. Those were challenges we faced before COVID-19. But this coronavirus, it's been a mean, it's been an evil pandemic. It has laid bare inequities, inequalities, and those on the margins, many of those who are already suffering, have been hit the hardest. Children without easy access to health care are in more danger. Children who lack resources struggle more with distance learning. And it's harder than ever to identify and reach children that may be suffering from abuse and neglect. But that doesn't mean that Kentucky Youth Advocates, Terry Brooks, or my administration aren't out there on the front lines fighting for those children every day. You look at what we have worked on with K-CHIP, ensuring that we get children out there who need health care signed up, and signing up so many Kentuckians for pandemic Medicaid at a time when everyone has to have health care. You look at the millions upon millions of meals that schools and other services have provided out in our communities. You look at the efforts by local governments and by state government to provide more broadband and internet access to our children than ever before. We are fighting for those children every day. But the Kids Count book shows you shows you how many out there are suffering. But they're more than numbers. Like my COVID updates each and every day, we can't just fall into thinking it's a county and an age. These are real children, children of God, that deserve the very best opportunities for us. So we not only have to get through this pandemic, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. There are 2 vaccines that may be incredibly effective, but we have to fight really hard to get there. Because not only is this pandemic robbing our children of educational opportunities and making things more difficult, but for some of them, it's taking their parents or their grandparents. In a state that per capita has more grandparents raising their grandchildren than ever before, we risk so many children losing that last person who is there to care about them. So we need everybody's very best to get through this pandemic. But then we have to recommit ourselves to not only addressing those inequities and inequalities, including racial inequalities that are sadly bolstered by systemic racism in virtually every part of our society. We have to truly address them. Because if a pandemic can't tell us it's time to give every child a true opportunity, if a pandemic can't teach us that we are better when we care about one another and we try to make sure that everybody has a chance and enough to get by, then nothing will teach us that. But I think that we have seen the commitment. And I think we have seen, when we look at other states and how they're doing this pandemic, that when we work together, we in Kentucky can achieve. What better way or purpose to work together than to improve the lives of every child around us? I think that's God's work. I think that's our work. I think that's our duty. And I believe that we are ready to do it. So to the Kentucky Youth Advocates and everybody participating today, thank you so much for what you do. There's so many children out there that are depending on us. So we're going to get through this pandemic, and we're going to get through it together. But you know what? The hard work's not going to end there. Let's make sure that every child can see a doctor when they need to. Every child gets a world-class education. Every child that, if they want to stay in this Commonwealth, can work at a good job where they make enough money to raise their own family working just that one job. Let's make sure that every child, when they eventually reach retirement, many, many, many years later, has a solid retirement where we live up to our promises. And let's make sure every child knows that these organizations and this Commonwealth cares about each and every one of them. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Senator Jimmy Hidgon. I'd like to welcome all those joining us via Zoom, Facebook Live for today's press conference. Thanks to Terry Brooks, Passport, and Kentucky Youth Advocates, and all partners that made the Kids Count initiative possible. Kids Count seeks to enrich the local, state, and national discussion on how to secure better futures for all children. The mantra of Kentucky Youth Advocates, what gets measured gets changed. This year, by every measure, has been difficult, especially for kids and families in Kentucky. Today, COVID-19 has impacted most everyone. It has made us more aware of issues kids in Kentucky face on a daily basis, especially children with special needs, children being raised by grandparents, and children in low-income families. Across the state, and especially in Jefferson County, children of color are being left behind. They are less likely to read at grade level or to be proficient in math, thanks to Kentucky Youth Advocates for data shining a light on inequities and inspiring action. I applaud Terry Brooks and Kentucky Youth Advocates for their vision of Kentucky being the best place in America to be young. In reviewing the data book, we see progress over the past 30 years. The data book gives us a snapshot at 17 key indicators, all based on research. On this year's report card, Kentucky showed improvement on 11 of 17 measured areas. 3 areas showed no change, and 3 areas we went backwards and will require special attention. Those 3 areas are low birth rate mothers, children in foster care, and children exiting foster care to reunification. A few other issues that showed up in the study that are not acceptable and need our attention. Kentucky is 40th in the nation in access to broadband. That really became evident during this COVID crisis with remote learning and NTI. Bills have been filed in the General Assembly to make internet more accessible and more affordable, especially in rural Kentucky. Kentucky is the third highest of all states in incarcerations. 12% of Kentucky kids have a parent incarcerated. We have been working in the General Assembly over the last several years on criminal justice reform, and many of these incarcerated are drug-related felonies. Reading literacy, as mentioned earlier, is an issue we discussed this past week in the Education Committee meeting. Reading at grade level is a bill that's being filed by Representative James Tipton, who is our next speaker today. During these studies, we found that 86% of students of color are below proficiency in reading. 56% of white students are below proficiency. Other issues that mentioned include teen suicide, childcare, and race disproportionality, all important issues. In closing, thanks for the opportunity to be with you today. Thanks, Terry Brooks, Passport, and all participating partners. Yes, we are improving, but we have a way to go to make Kentucky the best place in America to be young. One thing leaders and advocates alike can agree on: kids are our most important resource. Thank you, and God bless Kentucky's kids.
Representative, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Representative James Tipton, and I sincerely appreciate the invitation to be here with you this morning and be a part of this vital discussion about our children in Kentucky. They are our greatest asset, and their welfare should be of utmost importance to us. First off, I want to thank Terry Brooks and all of his staff at Kentucky Youth Advocates for hosting this very important discussion. You do a tremendous job of advocating for our state's most vulnerable children, and I appreciate your dedication to this very worthy cause. I appreciate hearing from you, Terry, and I look forward to hearing from the other partners on this call as we further this discussion this morning. You know, as a lawmaker, it's very important for me to make decisions based on the facts and to make concrete decisions in our policy decisions. It's our duty as elected officials to make laws based on the best information possible. There's a common saying in Frankfurt that policymakers have to have enough knowledge of an issue to go an inch deep and a mile wide. Really what that means is we have to have a basic understanding of a broad range of topics. So it's vitally important for us to have the detailed information, particularly on issues that impact our children. This can be extremely challenging. I remember back in my first session in the House back in 2015, I got my first copy of the data book from Kentucky Youth Advocates. I didn't have to go very far this morning in my office to find my copy from last year. This is something I look forward to every year. I have actually county profiles from my different counties here, Fincher, Anderson, and Bullitt, that I represent. And I look at this information and I study it year to year to get an understanding of where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go. And that's so essential. I truly appreciate you making this publication available. I know that we have many new members. The General Assembly will be coming in January, and I know they're going to look forward and appreciate this resource as well. We face many challenges, and especially in this time, when my colleagues and I return to Frankfurt in a little over a month, we're going to be tasked with trying to help our state recover and rebuild from the devastating impact and effects in our response to this virus. As a member of the House Appropriations and Revenue Committee, our top priority or constitutional obligation will be to pass a one-year budget. This is an unusual situation, but I truly believe that the facts and information that are laid out in this handbook, especially as it relates to our children in the state of Kentucky and those who are living in poverty, who have special needs, will help us to get a good sense and make informed decisions where we can invest our scarce resources in the best possible way for our children to have the most impact. I'm also a member of the House Education Committee. And as already been mentioned, access to education is critically important. We have many areas that do not have reliable broadband access, and that's something that we have to invest in. That's something we have to work on. I appreciate Senator Hidgon's comments about the legislation that myself and Senator West are working on together to improve early literacy in our Commonwealth. We're looking at that fourth grade benchmark score because that is a true indicator of the likelihood of success for our children going forward, not only in their education career, but in life. We've got a lot of problems facing us going forward, but this handbook is going to help us make more informed, fact-based decisions about our state's pressing needs so that any change or investment will have a substantial and meaningful impact. I believe that our 2021 session, the Kentucky General Assembly, will continue to enact policies that will make Kentucky the best place for families to live and work, even during this global pandemic. And I thank you all for giving us this necessary information that will help us achieve this mission. Again, I appreciate the opportunity for being here this morning and being part of this discussion. And let us never forget that our children are the future of Kentucky. All of our children, every child in our Commonwealth is the future of Kentucky. Thank you. May God bless you. May God bless our great state in the United States of America.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, Representative. You know, it's important in the midst of so much news that we read to remember that Kentucky's kids really do have champions and thoughtful cheerleaders for them in Frankfort every day, such as Representative Tipton and Senator Hidgon. So thank you all for taking time in your schedule to do that. As we mentioned, we totally believe there are opportunities in Washington, and there are certainly opportunities in Frankfort to make a difference for kids. But every day, on the ground, community leaders fight for kids and families across Kentucky. I think especially as we sit here today, I believe that one of the key issues that will be talked about in Frankfort, I believe one of the key issues that is going to animate budget discussions is around the role of public benefits. And you know, and I know that when we're talking about things like SNAP and KTAP, that we are talking about how to offer a hand up to families. That is such a vital discussion. And so many aspects of a child's well-being is based upon having access to those kind of supports. We wanted to highlight them in both unique populations, whether that's urban or rural or families of color. And joining us today are two absolute champions for kids and families in Kentucky. First, we will hear from Karina Barillas, who is the executive director of the La Casita Center, which serves the Latinx community in Louisville. And then we have Jennifer Hancock, who is president and CEO of Volunteers of America Mid-States. And what I think you'll find in Jennifer's remark is the fascinating connection between all the locations she serves, whether that's the Freedom House in Louisville or the Freedom House in Manchester. The threads that I've heard Jennifer talk about suggest that the Commonwealth has common themes. So Karina, Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today. Karina, we're going to kick off with you, and then Jennifer is going to follow. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Terry. Buenos dias and good morning to everybody. The first thing that I want to say is I am really humble and really honored to be part of this process of the Kids Count book. I want to tell you, Terry, that you have a group of champions in your staff, absolutely amazing. I am a very proud Latina Kentuckian, and I'm going to tell you that in my 26 years of being part of this community, I have never seen and I have never experienced the intentionality of including communities that systematically are invisible. Um, I really appreciate all the data that we are sharing in the book. I really appreciate that we are talking about systematic racism and inequities in our communities. And I really appreciate that we are talking about how the pandemic and everything is affecting all of us. But the truth of the matter is that yes, it affects all of us, but there are some populations, included the Latinx population, the immigrant population, that is affected in more challenging ways due to lack of access, due to fears. When we talk about the health, the education, the housing, the digital divide that we have in our state, we are also talking about families, children that on a daily basis are afraid of being profiled, are afraid of not being able to see their parents again. They're having parents that have to decide between going to work and getting sick, or getting sick at home, and everybody with the possibility of becoming homeless or not having enough food to provide to their families. These are real issues. And I love the conversation that we are all mentioning, that we have the commitment for every single Kentucky child. They are our present. They are our future. And when we say every single Kentucky child, we are talking about the ones that have those extra challenges. We are talking about those ones whose parents didn't know about the pandemic at the beginning in March, and that they didn't have access to the information. They were blindly just following the flow, everybody not going to school, things being closed without knowing what was happening. So the silver linings of this pandemic, the silver linings as well of our Kids Count book, is for us to realize all the collaborations, and for us to realize as well that even the data that we are presenting needs a lot of work, because a lot of communities are still invisible in the rural areas, in the immigrant populations, with our African American siblings, with our LGBTQ siblings. So it is very important that we recognize that as a state, as a Commonwealth, there is so much work to be done. And this is a very wonderful and refreshing first step, where we can say, let's look at each other as one community, how we work together, how we look at those children with the special care needs, not as a burden, but as very important and intrinsic part of our community. So with that, I want to thank again the opportunity to share with you the struggle of the communities that we accompany. And also, I want to share with you the hope, because it is with a very hopeful and loving heart that I am grateful that we are having this conversation today. That is not something that we are hiding in a drawer anymore, that we are facing it, that we are talking about it, and that we are looking for solutions, not solutions that usually mainstream and the system gives us, but in systems that are totally de-mainstreamified and that are meaningful and that really have an impact in the families of the children that we are trying to lift up. Thank you, and gracias for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to see what we come up in 2021.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank Terry and his incredible KYA team. Your work and your leadership is absolutely invaluable to our Commonwealth, and I am extremely grateful for your partnership. We count on you for data, for exceptional advocacy, and for your leadership. And at VOA, we believe in data-driven programs and outcome-based solutions, and your work is simply essential to that end. And thank you to all of our speakers today, to Senator Hidgon and Representative Tipton, to Governor Beshear and his team. Taking care of our Kentucky families is a bipartisan effort that requires all of us. It takes Democrats and Republicans. It takes corporations and nonprofits. It takes health plans like the one Ryan and his team at Passport Molina run. It takes community activists and faith leaders. It takes all of us working together. And our community is extremely fortunate to have community activist Karina Barillas leading La Casita and providing a vital voice and services to some of the most vulnerable amongst us. So thank you to everyone for your leadership that is truly inspiring. Volunteers of America is a provider of critical behavioral health services, but we're also a connector. And today we're a connector during a pandemic. COVID cannot keep us from connecting families and children to the care, resources, and treatment they need. Those connections are hard and they are fragile, and we rely on our partners to help us and support us and the people we serve. And our families rely on us and other partners like the Commonwealth of Kentucky to support them. We provide comprehensive services to families at Unity House, where today 45 children and their families are overcoming homelessness, or at Freedom House, where pregnant and parenting moms are beating substance use disorder. The public benefits our clients rely on are needed for the essential steps in their recovery, from food assistance to housing opportunities to seeing a doctor and staying healthy. Public investments are down payments on the future. An investment in people in recovery, in people in need, and in people who are making progress toward a brighter tomorrow where they don't need to rely on public benefits any longer. We know that benefits are an investment, and we see that they are essential in Jefferson County, just as they are vital in Clay or Jackson or Mercer counties. It doesn't matter if the families we serve are urban or rural. Our comprehensive supports relies on a partnership with a government that is making reasonable and sensible investments in nutrition, stable housing, and basic medical care. These are necessities, and we can invest now, or we will pay so much more later. At VOA, we see firsthand the real cost associated with poverty and inequity. Some of those costs are human. The injustice is not acceptable and the suffering is real. And some of those costs show in the bottom lines of state and local governments or nonprofit providers. These are costs we must all work together to overcome. VOA, La Casita, and KYA support smart, upfront investments that mitigate the human and financial costs and deal with the root causes of poverty and inequity. We support smart, common sense investments. We believe in investing in preventative healthcare instead of EMS runs for overdoses or NICU stays for babies born exposed to substances. We believe in investing in housing stability and education instead of incarceration and youth detention. We believe in investing in early treatment for substance use disorder instead of the skyrocketing expense and heartbreaking trauma of out-of-home placements. It's not a question of spending. The cost of inequity are very real and ultimately will be paid by all of us. It's a question of spending earlier, smarter, and for better outcomes. We are expanding because we see the need at Volunteers of America, not only in Jefferson County, but in southeastern Kentucky. Every day we see examples of moms without the support of Freedom House and a public safety net who would have literally nowhere else to turn. I think of our first Freedom House graduate in Manchester. Brittany had tried and she had been unsuccessful in treatment many times before, but she clicked with our team and the long-term comprehensive support at Freedom House. So today, instead of being a potential expense, Brittany is employed by the city of Manchester. She's working. She's reunited with and supporting her family. She's paying taxes. She's hardworking, and she has seen the professional and personal success that we knew she could have for the very first time in her life. In fact, her story was just featured in People magazine. Brittany is a real example of what we can achieve by working together. The support Brittany and those like her receive that launches them on a path to long-term recovery and work is an invaluable investment that allows people in need to actively participate in the economy, to spend and invest and plan for their futures. So Terry, Governor, and to our leaders in the General Assembly, Volunteers of America stands ready to partner with you to find even more ways we can support the most vulnerable children and families across the Commonwealth that launches them to successful futures. Thank you.
Many thanks, Karina and Jennifer. I don't know about those joining us, but whenever I hear Karina and Jennifer talk, I'm both humbled and I'm inspired. When I hear remarks from Representative Tipton and Senator Hidgon and the governor, I'm motivated to make sure that we move around that bias for action, beginning with the opening gavel in that 2021 session. And if you were inspired by today's event, by the remarks and by the potential, I would invite you to do a number of things. First of all, do the hard work of a deep data dive. Our 2020 county data book and county profiles, including a full Spanish translation of all of our data, is available at kyouth.org. Secondly, many of you already are joining our Wednesday morning advocacy forums. I think we have done some 36 of those. The next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be digging into kids count, and we're going to be digging into the 2021 General Assembly. So please register to join us beginning tomorrow for a deep, deep dive into the data, having a chance to interact with even more community partners around takeaways and implications for Frankfort. Follow us on social media. Go ahead and get on your calendar Children Advocacy Week virtually in Frankfort. Go to our website, register, get ready for that. A big thank you to all of you who joined. Additional and affirming thanks to Passport Molina for their signature support, along with Avisa's Mountain Comprehensive Care and Kosare Charities. Thanks for everyone who was part of today's event, and thanks for everyone committed to making Kentucky the very best place in America to grow up young.